If you want to know just how good the brand new GH7 is from Lumix, then stick around. Last night Lumix launched the GH7, and just for your benefit I stayed up. I watched the presentations, I watched a whole host of reviews, and I've gathered today 7 of the best across camera nerd YouTube so that we can take a look at what has really been said about this GH7. We can get a kind of general idea. Is this camera everything it's cracked up to be? Is it better than the GH6? Is it a worthy upgrade from the GH5? You know, it looks fundamentally the same as the GH6. So with all that said and done, let's take a look at some examples from these amazing video creators across YouTube, see what they said about the GH7, compare it to my considerable experience with the GH4, 5 and 6, and get some idea about whether the GH7 is right for you. The big headline feature for the GH7 is of course that it's got face detect autofocus. This is widely covered in all the reviews. Although I like Gerald Undun's stickiness test, I could just feel myself like going from, oh crap, is gel gonna rag on Lumix again, to just feeling him becoming his slightly silly Canadian self. And that was absolutely spot on. As well as the nice side-by-sides from Geeky Nerdy Techie. He uses a lot of different lenses, he's got a lot of comparative video from other GH cameras, and fair play to him for really producing some great content there when it comes to the phase detect autofocus. Big respect to Jordan for showing the magical 240 frames per second feature. And really, there is no better test of 32-bit audio than seeing Gerald come completely undone.
And you'll be able to hear the quality of the preamps, and that even when I'm shouting, the 32-bit float allows me to easily recover any audio that would have otherwise been clipped. Unlimited downloads of diverse and high-quality content for one predictable subscription cost. No more expensive pay-per-clip pricing, just pick a plan, pay that fee, and that's it.
Beyond the audio, there is raw internal capture on the GH7, and this was covered off nicely by Geeky Nerdy Tech, by OBP, and by Gordon Lang. They showed the footage inside Final Cut. Obviously, Apple ProRes, that codec works in Final Cut. If you didn't know already, Apple ProRes RAW isn't compatible with DaVinci Resolve. And this is a point, and a good point, that OBP picked up on, the fact that a lot of people have recently gone from Premiere to Resolve, from Final Cut to Resolve, and the fact that Apple ProRes RAW isn't compatible is a bit of a downer, because obviously to get that to function in Resolve you'd need to transcode it to another codec, whereas of course if Lumix had chosen Blackmagic RAW, that's got a nice particular flavor of RAW, 20:1 compression for instance, where you could get probably hours of content onto a 1 terabyte SSD, whereas with ProRes RAW you're only going to get about 28 minutes or something like that on a 1 terabyte drive. So yeah, good points there, and those are things which, you know, that's the reasons why I watch a whole bunch of different YouTube camera nerds, because they all bring something to the table. Now, aside from the nerdy tests, for all the filmmakers and documentary makers out there, there's always Patrick Tomaso. You can always rely on him for a very nice montage. And in this first impressions video, he gave us just that, a fabulous little montage, a kind of true crime-esque look, which showed off the camera's ability to capture in low light and with some wide dynamic range, and just to get a really nice look and to show how filmic it can be. So that said, fair play to you, Pat, you did a good job there. And he also mentioned about how he could see himself using the GH7, which is very similar to how I already use the GH6.
I'm not looking at this as a new A cam. I'm looking at this as the ultimate B cam, the perfect supplementary camera for all of my productions, especially documentary work. And that was really the theme of that footage that I shot. If I was shooting B-roll on any sort of documentaries, particularly something like true crime related, the GH7 is the camera I would use. I would use a full frame camera for my talking heads, my interviews and all that kind of stuff. But for all the B-roll, walking around with my subjects, all that kind of stuff, mounting it to a car, I would use the GH7.
So if you've owned a Lumix GH6 like me, you'll know that it already had LUT support within it. Although now with the GH7, it's called Lab Support, and they've got an app where you can make your own LUTs. That's super convenient and I'm sure way easier than making your own LUTs in Photoshop or using a third-party piece of software. But suffice to say, it's not really much of an upgrade or change particularly. With the GH6 and GH7, there is a paid-for upgrade to add an ARRI LUT to this camera, which has been developed specifically for the GH6 and GH7 sensors, so that these cameras can be used as B cams to ARRIs. That's pretty wild. I appreciate that, but that's 200 quid. It's not going to be a free thing. And if you've just got another ARRI to 709 LUT, apparently not the same. This is completely different and the chef's kiss of chemistry when it comes to color profiles. So yeah, well done Lumix for that. If you want to know how good the GH7 is for photography, then the Petapixel, Gordon Lang and Micro Four Nerds are the videos to check out. There's some great examples there. So for all you photographers, it's a big thumbs up from those reviewers. It's a fab camera for photography. Now, one of my main gripes about the GH6 is the fact that the battery life isn't just what it was with the GH5. It's just a little bit under par. I tend to find that I'll get about an hour or so of 5.8K out of a battery. This was reconfirmed by Jordan Drake from Petapixel, and Geeky Nerdy Techie said he could get 2 hours of 4K 25 out of a BLK 22. And also, interestingly, that the BLK 19s that came with the GH5 are also compatible with the GH7 as they were in the GH6, but only on particular codecs and frame rates. So if you're up to 4K 60, they should work just fine. Anything over that, you'll need the BLK 22s. So that's a win for GH5 users. Now, I'm sure some of you are shouting at the screen already, saying, shut up, we don't want to hear about a Micro Four Thirds camera, surely we can just buy a full frame camera for the same money. And well, yes, you could buy an S5 Mark IIX for the same price as the GH7, which is about £2,000. But in the GH7, there isn't going to be any crop. So when you're on 4K 60 or 4K 120 or 5.8K or 5.7K, no crop. As long as you've got a wide lens, it's going to stay a wide lens. Whereas in the S5 Mark II or Mark IIX, any of the S-line cameras, when you get above 4K 60 and above, everything is cropped. It's a 1.5 times crop. So even if you've got a super wide lens like the Sigma 14 to 24, you're going to end up with like a 21 to 36 or something like that. It's just not really very wide. So that's where these Micro Four Thirds cameras do have a little extra something. You can just go through your day with often with like a 24 to 70 equivalent, a 12 to 35, and you can just be knocking it out the park. You don't have to worry about, you know, flicking it onto a different mode or, you know, shooting just in HD. You can shoot high res and high frame rates and not have to switch out lenses. So I said there was no crop. Apparently there is in Cinema 4K. If you want to record ProRes RAW, there is a 1:1 pixel crop. So it's taking a chunk out of the middle of the sensor. So what are the downsides to the GH7? Well, according to Emily at Micro Four Nerds, when you connect an SSD drive and record certain codecs out, you need to have the DC coupler attached to give the camera extra power. So take that on board. One of the biggest issues with the GH6 was its implementation of dynamic range boost, which kicks in at ISO 2000 and isn't available on certain frame rates like 120p. With the GH7, the ISO limit for dynamic range boost is much lower. When it comes to image stabilization, Lumix are legendary, and with the GH7 they've upped it a notch. They've got a very similar implementation as has been just delivered to the S5 Mark II. It's high E stabilization. On the S5 Mark II it crops in a little bit. It may well do it on the GH7 too, where you're activating this mode. And it is fantastic. Gerald Undone showed that you can practically run with it. And there's some good examples from Chris and Jordan at Petapixel 2. If you really want to dig into the GH7's tech and how well it performs with rolling shutter, dynamic range and latency, then do check out Gerald Undone's video from about the 7-minute mark. When the GH6 came out, there was a big hoo-ha about filming in strong contrasty conditions, about light streaks, and it really got a bit overblown. Good for us that Geeky Nerdy Techie did a few tests, and on his video around about the 15-minute mark you will find that there is a comparison between the GH6, GH7 and also a Sony camera, just to show how this phenomena comes up and how you can work around it, and just showing you essentially that there's nothing to worry about. The GH7 is also a fabulous camera when it comes to low light and dealing with high contrast filming. Lastly, just a big shout out to the 7 YouTube channels whose work I've used and probably misused within this overview of a review, of a first impression of a camera, of a blah blah. It's like Russian dolls, this whole thing. It's getting well too meta. But suffice to say, within all of it and in my heart, a big thank you to you for creating the content. And I subscribe to your channels. I love your work, so keep doing what you do. Right, on to the next bit. So that's it for this one. If you've enjoyed the video, please like and consider subscribing to the channel. It all helps. Leave a comment down below if you've got anything to say about my mug, this video, or if you've got any videos yourself that you want to share with me about your experience with the GH lineup. I always like to see what other creators are making. And until the next time, enjoy your filmmaking. And I'm Adam Loretz from the Filmmakers Workshop. So bye for now.
You know, when I was hearing the spec of this camera, I was sort of looking between my fingers and expecting the worst. But actually, it's available at the end of July, and it's going to be £1,999 body only. Under 2,000 beans, and you get all of these features. I think that's such a competitive price. I'm really happy with that. I'm cradling it like a child.